democracy, people constantly endeavor to have but highly controversial instrument for political action.
Sorry, folks, I feel but a minute. Field's coming to a vote. The pressure boys have been after me all day.
Now, Senator, about that,
on that. Say, you're new on this job, aren't you?
Yes, Senator, this is Joe Tuma. He's the new man covering the State House for the Sun.
Glad to meet you, Joe.
Senator, these pressure groups give you a rough time, don't they?
Well, yes and no.
No, but they do get our hair a good deal, don't they?
And do you really know what a pressure group is?
Well, I've seen them in action around the State House long enough.
But you still don't know. Let me tell you something. Any spokesman for a group who comes in here to see me is talking for people. Important groups of people. And believe me, I listen to them.
But, Senator, what about your party? Isn't that organized to give expression to people's political opinions?
Yes, political parties are organized for that purpose, but pressure groups do a somewhat different job. After all, political parties are largely concerned with getting people elected to office.
And pressure groups aren't?
Well, in a little different way, as you'll find out after you've been here a while. Certainly, pressure groups are interested in who gets elected, and they often work for the election of candidates. But you won't see a pressure group nominating and supporting a candidate for office in the same way the political parties do. No, sir. They leave that to the parties.
Yeah, they're too busy pulling wires behind scenes.
Sometimes they are, but that's not the point. All pressure groups, regardless of their aims and methods, are made up of groups of people who have certain common interests and who want to get the public and the government to adopt certain policies.
By the way, what are the important pressure groups in your district?
Well, just about the same as they are everywhere else in the country, I suppose. Yeah. Take a look at some of the letters I get, for example. There are all kinds of groups interested in political issues these days. In fact, there are few people today who are not involved in one way or another in the activities of pressure groups. Among the most active and effective are the economic pressure groups. All these organizations of businessmen, farmers, laboring men, professional men, and even consumers. They carry on pressure activity to further the economic interests of large groups of people. Then there are other pressure groups who speak for special interests, groups acting to protect racial and national interests and minorities, organizations promoting patriotism, and groups working for a wide range of civic reforms and improvements.
All these groups put pressure on you?
Yes. I can always count on hearing from them whenever anything comes up that affects their interests.
I bet you do. If they had their way, you fellows would be running the government exclusively for them, not for the general public. That's what's wrong with public affairs today. All these pressure groups in every city hall, every state capital, even down in Washington, all playing politics, scheming, conniving, putting on the heat. And for what? To get you fellows in government to run things their way.
That's where you're wrong, son. Actually, pressure groups serve a useful purpose in giving people a greater voice in their government.
I'd like to see you demonstrate that, Senator.
Well, I think I can. You remember that slum cleanup bill we passed in the last session of the legislature?
Sure, that was a constructive piece of legislation.
Well, the pressure group had a lot to do with putting that over. And I'll tell you how it happened.
It seems that being fair with you, Thomas, hasn't done much good, has it? On 4 different occasions, and with only minor punishment, I've attempted to consider your disrespect for the law as something you might possibly outgrow. But now it appears the only thing that is growing is your disrespect for that law.
Sir, Judge, I don't think Tommy understands you. He does respect the law.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Williams, but after careful consideration, I find it necessary to send you aboard to the State Reform School for a term of not less than 1 year.
You won't change your mind, Judge.
No, I'm sorry. Your boy is certainly old enough to be responsible for his actions.
He's responsible, huh? Well, look at the neighborhood we have to live in. No place for the boys to play. Nothing around them but filth and corruption. Who's responsible? Well, it's you people.
Now, Steve, you promised last week not to bring your cases home with you.
I'm sorry, Helen. More and more, I find it impossible to forget what I see in my court.
I know, Steve. Perhaps the answer is on its way.
The answer? His mother had the answer. She said all of us were to blame, that we're to blame for conditions in that part of town.
And she was right, Stephen. We think we have a progressive community, but we've been keeping our eyes closed. It's up to us, the parents, to clean up those slums.
What can we do? We'll take an act of the state legislature. Talked about it for years, but where's the support?
The people of this city could get the legislature to act if they put on enough pressure. And I'm going to do something about it. A lot of people feel the same way.
What are you going to do, launch a pressure group?
I don't care what you call it, but I'm going to start it right now.
Responsible citizens with common interests turn automatically to pressure group activity to gain political ends. A movement may begin with a single person or a few with a common cause.
It's up to us to make every neighborhood in this town a fit place for our children to grow up. It's up to us to clean up the slums. We must do it now. Thank you, ladies. Ladies, I know we all want to thank Mrs. Snow for her very eloquent appeal, and we're going to get behind this drive 100%. Why, it's just shocking. But what can we do about it?
Yes, Madam Chairman, just what can we do? It takes an act of the state legislature.
We'll all have to get to work on this thing, and there'll be plenty for everyone to do. Now, here's what I suggest.
Many organizations maintain headquarters in state and national capitals. Here, the paid representatives of pressure groups keep watch over government and battle for the political demands of their members back home.
So that's what we're up against. Our people want action. You've got to help us.
Mrs. Snow, we're ready to put the whole state organization behind you. We'll show you real pressure. Won't we, Miss Dodd?
I hope so. Fine. Our people are really up in arms about this.
All right. Now, the first step is to get the plan for cleaning up the city slums introduced in the House and the Senate.
Well, I've already talked to Representative Pritchard from our district. He'll introduce the bill in the House.
Now, Miss Dodd, who would you suggest in the Senate? You usually carry a senator or two around in your handbag.
Well, there's Senator Broyle. He's from Mrs. Snow's district. He'll introduce the bill, and he carries a lot of weight.
All right. What's the next step?
I have a plan of strategy. But first, let's get together with Broyles and Pritchard.
All right.
There's the bill, ready to go. We're going to introduce it tomorrow. Does it cover everything?
Senator, if it'll give us the power to clean up the slums in our town, then it covers everything.
I think it does the job. Representative Pritchard will handle it in the House. I'll look after it in the Senate.
We'll get it through the House easily enough.
That Senate committee is the real hurdle. If we can sell it to the committee, the Senate will pass it.
And the committee is loaded with men who are against the whole cleanup idea.
Let's see who's on the committee now. Well, there's Farnham, there's Smith, there's Jenkins. Carey, there's one vote you can count on.
Yes, Miss Dodd. They say around the State House that every time Senator Jenkins has dinner with you, he changes his vote the next day.
Senator Jenkins is an intelligent man. I see a good chance to line up a majority of that committee.
I wouldn't bet on it. I'll do the best I can, of course, but the real work's up to you folks.
But why wouldn't you bet on it, Senator? After all, we're fighting on the right side. Who could fail to see the wisdom of it?
Nobody could, Mrs. Snow. Nobody at all. But they'll see it quicker if they think a lot of voters are behind it. You've got to put pressure on them. Real, honest-to-goodness pressure from the people.
And so the pressure is on. The strategy of a pressure group that works democratically is to mobilize widespread public support for its program. By persuading citizens to express their opinions and stimulating discussion and debate, the group attempts to create sentiment which will influence the views of the men whose vote will decide legislation.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Carlson.
I represent the Association for Community Welfare. We're working on that slum clearance bill, you know. I wonder if you'd let me explain the bill to you.
Won't you come inside?
Thank you.
We expect every one of you ladies to write your representatives in the legislature demanding that they vote on this bill. We urge you to canvass the mothers in the neighborhood. Get them to write too. Now, as you leave, you will find the pamphlets on the table at the door.
Ladies, the Evening Times is giving you all the help we can. Look here. A full-column front-page story on the mass meeting you held last night.
Yes, Mr. Thompson, but that's not enough. We don't feel the public is getting all the facts.
But we are printing everything that's news.
Mr. Thompson, here's one of the pamphlets we've put out. Do your readers know that juvenile delinquency in this city has gone up 25% in the last 10 years?
No, I'm sure I didn't know that myself. Let's see what else is here.
You'll find a lot of information there that's news, Mr. Thompson. Now, wouldn't this be a good time to start an editorial campaign appealing to civic pride? Good morning, Senator.
Morning, Miss George.
Well, there's a lot of mail again this morning, Senator Jenkins. Most of it about that slum cleanup bill. I suggest you look over some of these letters.
That's so any from my district?
Yes, you'll recognize the names.
Well, what do you know? Old George Whitby. He's worked for me in several campaigns. I guess I'm going to have to give that bill some serious study.
These facts and figures you've given me tonight, they're quite convincing, Miss Dodd. Better watch out, Senator. You know, Miss Dodd is most disarming just before she moves in for the kill.
All we want, Senator, is your vote for our bill.
Well, you have presented a strong argument. Your most telling point is these figures on what slum conditions are costing the city and state. But I've got to study this matter further. Consider both sides.
But, Senator Smith, how can you speak of two sides to this question? Surely no thinking people are opposed to this proposal.
I'm afraid so, Miss Dodd. There's plenty of opposition. And in a democracy, there's usually two sides to every question.
Vital to the processes of democracy is the airing of both sides of controversial questions through open discussion and public debate. Many groups of citizens, however, are afraid to present their opinions in the open forum of public discussion. Instead, they try to achieve their ends by working entirely behind the scenes, corrupting public officials and deceiving the public. The aims of such groups may be either good or bad, so far as the public interest is concerned, but their methods are a grave danger to democratic institutions.
Hi, Carl. Joe, look at this. The Star's sure going all out in that campaign to clean up the slums. We've got to do something. Why, do you know it cost me in assessments if that plan went through? It's ridiculous.
You're just making a mountain out of a molehill. That won't go through. They've tried it before. I've owned this building and run this store here for 10 years, and nobody's going to ruin my business.
That's what you think. But this time it's serious. Just look at this editorial. Look at those stories. Meetings, radio broadcasts, the whole town's stirred up.
Sure, but too many of us who have property here have too much to lose by it. Wait till the money begins to talk.
That's just why I'm here. As chairman of the West Side Improvement Club, I'm calling a meeting tonight in Johnson's Cafe. We're going to lick this thing, but it will take money.
Thus, pressure for one course of action may, in some cases, generate counter-pressure for another. Very often, pressure groups gain control of civic organizations in order to give their views a spurious appearance of public support.
No, Bill, I can't go along with you on this, even though you know how much I stand to lose by this slum cleanup program.
So, what are you going to do? Cut your own throat?
Not if I can help it. But I've decided we've got to give in to that plan. In the long run, we'll all profit by it.
Well, gentlemen, let's call it a night. Looks like we're not going to get together on this. Let's think it over a few days. Meeting's adjourned.
What was the idea of adjourning before we could vote?
I was afraid to put it to a vote. Not enough of them were with us.
What are we going to do now? We've got to fight that bill, whether the rest of them like it or not.
We're going to fight it. I'm still running this outfit. It'll take money, but I have an idea. Now, here's what we'll do.
The most effective tactic of unscrupulous and undemocratic groups is to bring personal influence to bear on public officials.
No. That's not the point. Your arguments don't convince me at all. Where are the facts?
Well, Senator, this is our position on it. And it's the position of most of the property interests concerned. Our association represents them.
Well, frankly, Mr. Drummond, I'm not sure who you represent.
Well, George, I wanted Drummond to explain this thing to you because I think he has a real case.
Perhaps he has, Henry, but he surely isn't selling me.
Well, what you may not know is that a lot of our good friends are really against this slum improvement proposition. Well, you take Joe Morgan, for example. Well, he used to be a client of yours, didn't he?
Yes, I did a lot of law work for him. So he's against it, huh?
Well, he feels like I do about it, that the legislature should move along more slowly. There's a lot of money in this, you know, George.
Yes, I know. I've been keeping that in mind.
I suggest that you think it over. By the way, you remember a few weeks back when we talked about that little investment deal?
Sure, I never had a promising proposition.
Well, you know, George, I think we can really cut you in on that. And I'll tell you what we're going to do.
When pressure groups work to achieve their ends through personal intrigue and corruption, they become a danger to democracy. Under these conditions, citizens' freedom of discussion is undermined, and public officials are apt to make decisions contrary to the public interest.
Now listen, Senator, I'm wholly against this slum cleanup program at this time. A great many people have taken a strong stand against it. I think our committee ought to study the whole matter thoroughly.
No, Senator, you're wrong. The facts are conclusive. This bill is clearly in the public interest.
I'm not so sure. Who were these people that spoke at the hearing? Why, Drummond didn't really express the views of the people he claimed to represent at all. The others were probably just as phony. I think Miss Dodd and her group gave us good, sound information.
Yes, and I'll tell you this. They have the support of a good many voters in our district.
Listen, are you going to let the pressure built up by a bevy of females influence your decision on this?
Not exactly. Now you listen. They're having public support because they have a sound position.
That's right. I've given both sides of this controversy careful study, and I'm convinced the bill is in the public interest.
All right, gentlemen, shall we come to order and put this question to a vote?
It was a close contest, but the bill went through. And those ladies were responsible for it. Now, that was a pressure group that really helped people to understand an issue and decide what to do about it.
Yes, but Senator, as usual, there was another kind of pressure group in there. The wrong kind.
Yes, but there needn't have been the wrong kind. After all, you can't judge a pressure group on the basis of the rightness or wrongness of its opinions. Everyone is entitled to his say in a democracy. Pressure groups representing selfish interests are sometimes right. And groups with noble humanitarian motives are sometimes wrong. Although I'll admit it's usually the other way around.
Well, perhaps so. But then, Senator, how do you judge a pressure group?
Why, by the methods they use, that's how. The question is this. Does a group work in an underhanded way to deceive the public, to misrepresent its case, and to try to influence the action of public officials through corruption or threats? Or does the group present its case fairly and openly in the forum of public discussion, trying to gain public support and influence the action of public officials by honest arguments?
Yes, that's certainly the question. But isn't there some way to keep pressure groups in check, to make certain that they use democratic methods?
Yes, there is a way. And that's by constant vigilance. Both private citizens and public officials should watch over pressure groups just as carefully as we watch over everything else in our political system. This is essential to the democratic process. Keep one thing in mind, fellas. You can only have pressure groups in a democratic country. Can you imagine trying to organize a pressure group under a despotism? In Nazi Germany or Soviet Russia, for example?
Right, Senator.
Yes, pressure groups can exist only in democratic nations, where citizens are free to express opinions on public questions and to engage in political action to further those opinions. In a democratic political system, citizens naturally organize themselves into pressure groups to make their opinions heard. Pressure groups bring important political issues to public attention and arouse citizens to take action on them. Pressure groups disseminate information on these issues and assist citizens to form opinions about them. Pressure groups provide citizens with convenient channels through which they can express their opinions directly to public officials. Out of the action of democratically organized pressure groups in the give and take of public discussion and debate, the interplay of political pressure and counterpressure, the democratic process of government grows stronger, giving citizens a larger share in the making of the decisions that affect their welfare.